Everyone, today I'm going to read Magic Treehouse Fact Tracker, Rags and Riches. Contents 1. Hard Times for Kids. 2. What Charles Dickens Are. 3. The London of Dickens. 4. Jobs for Poor Kids. 5. Rich Kids. 6. How Things Change. Doing more research index. Wait a minute, this is going a bit wrong. Okay, there. Dear readers, after we traveled to Victorian England with the famous author Charles Dickens, Ghost Tales of Christmas Time, we wanted to find out more about him and kids in his time, so we decided to track the facts. We went to the library and checked out the books about Charles and his world. When we searched our computer, everything we could find about kids in London, England, where he lived. We learned that in 18,000s, London was the largest and richest city in the world. We learned that the city was overcrowded with people. The people who suffered a lot, especially kids. And we are amazed by their lives and hope you will be too. So get your notebooks and your pencils. Let's jump on a steam train to the Charles Dickens England. Chapter 1: Hard Times for Kids. In the 18,000s, England was a very powerful country. The city of London was the largest, richest city in the world. Signs of the city's wealth were everywhere. Parks, stores, factories, and beautiful buildings filled the city. Down by the wharves, hundreds of workers built ships that sailed all over the world. Factories ran night and day, turning out things like cloth, beer, furniture, and watches. London was growing, and the number of people in the city was growing. Wait a minute, why this book has a lot of... Well, new buildings seemed to go up overnight. As the city grew, many people made money and lived very well. But there was another side of London. While the city was rich, it was also poor. Terrible slums stood only blocks away from beautiful mansions. While the people ate fancy restaurants, others were hungry, homeless, and sick. Wealthy children visited parks, and museum gangs or poor children roamed museums. Gangs of poor children roamed the street, selling everything they could find and sometimes even stealing. Why was life so hard for these children? What caused such terrible poverty in this rich city? The Industrial Revolution. For thousands of years, most people in England lived in the country. Children grew up on farms and in small villages. They worked alongside parents on the farms and village shops. Parents treated them like little adults. Although children were hard, they were with their families or other people they knew. This country life changed in the late 17th. The Industrial Revolution had begun in England. Much of the old way of life came to an end, and things were never the same again. The Industrial Revolution started around 1790 and lasted until the early 19th. The discovery of the steam engines helped to start it. In the past, factories used river water to power their machines. Steam engines made it possible to build factories everywhere, not just next to rivers. Factories and mills sprang up in town and city all over England. Thousands of people left the countryside hoping to find work in them. Trains speed things up. While most of the 18,000s there were no cars, people walked or used horses and boats to get around. Traveling anywhere took a lot of time. This problem was solved by steam-powered trains. They made it possible to get places quickly. A trip that used to take days could now be made in hours. Person walking fast, 44 miles per hour. Horse-drawn carriage, 10 miles per hour. Train, 30 and 40 miles per hour. By 1854, thousands of miles of train track connected cities and towns to one another. Trains became the most popular way to travel and to ship products from the factories. Trains puffed in and out of London night and day, carrying hundreds of people. Industrial Revolution. Steam engine. New factories everywhere. People moved from the country. Trains. Problems for the poor. By 1850s, all the people in England lived in cities such as London. Because London was prepared for these great numbers, housing was a problem. Those who could not afford houses crowded into run-down buildings, many sharing only a few rooms. Factory jobs paid little, and often people could not find jobs at all. Children roamed the London street with no home of their own. Poor kids work in factories just like adults. Factory owners did not know or care about the kids. When I got sick, there were always other children who needed jobs. In the early 18s, many children began working when they were 5 or just 6 years old. The workday could last 12 hours or more, 6 days a week. For this, they received only a few pennies. Through the 19th century, there were people who tried to help kids. In the early 1830s, there were new laws to make children's workdays shorter. By the end of the 18th, it was again allowed to hire very young children. Factory conditions had improved, and fewer children worked. In the 1890s, the government said that all children had to go to school until they were 10 years old. The school was free and gave many children a chance to learn and read and write. Life for a lot of children was still very hard. Workhouses. Many children who worked in factories called workhouses. The poor could move to a workhouse if they had no home or money. Workhouses were not meant to be nice places to live. They were built to encourage people to work. In exchange for work, people were given food and a place to sleep. Unless they were too old or sick, everyone in the workhouse had to work. Someone cooked and cleaned at the workhouse. Others worked in factories and had other jobs. Even though workhouses were meant to have people, many were dirty and overcrowded. Our sun was barely enough to eat, and children and women were beaten. Factories owners often used children from the workhouse. They paid the people who ran the workhouse for each child they got from them. But these children did not get paid and had signed to contracts saying that they would remain the job as long as they were needed. In many ways, it was like being sold into slavery. In order to give homeless children better places and live in workhouse or the streets, a doctor named Thomas John Barnardo began setting up an orphanage for them. Children lived there and were given food and clothing. They also learned skills and got education. By the time Dr. Barnardo died in the 1905, it was estimated that these homes has helped almost 60,000 children. Queen Victoria. England has queens and kings for a long time. Queen Victoria was crowned in the 1837 when she was just 18. She ruled over 60 years. That's longer than any other English king or queen. The time dating during Victoria's reign is called the Victorian. Victoria ruled over the British Empire. The empire means that one country controls many other countries. Australia, India, Canada, and parts of Africa were some of the areas made of the British Empire. Queen Victoria died in 1901 when she was 81 years old. Because she had been the queen for so long, many people felt as if they lost a member of their family. There are more statues of Queen Victoria in England and many other king or queen have been also movies and books written about her life. Queen Elizabeth II, who is queen today, is Victoria's great-great-granddaughter. Queen Victoria, her husband Prince Albert, and 5 of their 9 children. Chapter 2. What Charles Dickens Saw. When the famous writer Charles Dickens lived in London much of his life, Charles often took walks around the city. He covered over 20 miles in a single day. As Charles strolled down the streets, he saw how the poor lived. He listened to the way they spoke and watched how they act. Charles wrote books about many of these people, especially poor children who have hard lives. Charles Dickens saw kids with no homes who slept in doorways and alleys. Even on the coldest days, the children wore tattered clothes and often went barefoot. He knew a lot of their troubles and felt sorry for them, having a boy with troubles of his own. Charles Dickens was born in 1812 in Portsmouth, England. He was the second child of John and Elizabeth Dickens. Charles' father had a good job in the Navy Pay Office, but his family was not rich. John Dickens was a kind, cheerful man, but he was careless with his money. He was often in debt. Being in debt means that you owe money to others. Money was always a problem with John Dickens. That made a problem with Charles' whole family. A boy who loved books. Charles' mother taught him to read and write. When Charles was a boy, it cost money to attend school. It's not until many years later that schools were free. In 1817, Dickens' family moved to the city of Chatham. During this time, the Dickens had enough money to send Charles to school. He loved books and often stayed stuck away in his bedroom reading fairy tales. While our children were playing sports, Charles lay in the grass reading. He has a rich imagination and made up stories and plays. When he grew up, on the windy, rainy nights, he loved to sit by the fire thinking about how he ever read. Charles made a toy theater. He and his sister Fanny act out plays and sang together. Debtor's prison. When Charlie was tough, his world turned upside down. Charles Dickens has borrowed more and more money. Finally, he could not pay any of his debts. In the 18,000s, people who could not pay their debts were sent to debtors' prisons. Some stayed there for many years. John Dickens went to Marshall Debtors' Prison. The prison was a grim building with massive walls. John Dickens had to stay there until he could pay back everyone he owned. In those days, family could live in debtors' prisons together. Because they had to sell their homes and furniture, Charlie's mother and younger sister and brothers lived in prison with their father. The family was heartbroken and full of shame. Warren Blacking Factory. Charles wrote that during this time he felt all alone with no one to help him, but his father found a job for him at Warren's blacking factory near the prison. Charles lived in a small rented room by himself. The factory was in an old run-down building. As he worked, Charles could hear rats squeaking and scurrying in the room. For 10 hours each day, he pasted labels of jars on shoe polishes. In spite of long hours, he earned very little. On weekends, he visited families and ran errands for his father. After prison. After John Dickens had been in prison for a few months, a relative died and left him enough money to pay his debts. The family was free, but Elizabeth Dickens was still worried about money. She wanted Charles to continue working. John, John Dickens disagreed and sent Charles back to school for several more years. When he was 15, Charles became a lottery clerk. Afterward, he worked for a newspaper. Later, he began to write for a living. Later life. Charles became one of the most popular writers in England. Even Queen Victoria read his novels. During his lifetime, he finished 20 books and many short stories, plays, and articles. Charles created amazing, colorful characters that had exciting adventures. He often wrote about children whose lives were hard, miserable, laugh and cry sometimes at the same time. When Charles was a little boy, he saw a beautiful house in the country. His name was Gad's Hill. Charles fell in love with this house. He told him that if he worked hard, he could buy a house just like it. So it was so hard that he was able to buy Gad's Hill. He lived there until he died. Charles Dickens' books have never gone out of print. They're in bookstores today. They include the titles like Oliver Twist, A Tale of Two Cities, David Copperfield, Great Expectations, Times, Hard Times, A Christmas Carol. There have been also 180 movies and TV shows made of his works. A Christmas Carol. John Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol in 1845. Poetry. His story, Greedy Old Man and Ebenezer Scrooge. One of the favorite characters of the book is a crippled boy named Timmy Tim. His father, Bob Cratchit, works for Scrooge. Scrooge pays Bob very little money. Because he is poor, Bob cannot afford a doctor for Tim. Tim will die unless he can get a medical care. In the story, Scrooge is made to realize his life is filled with selfishness. He changed completely. He makes sure the Cratchit family has a good Christmas and gives them enough money to cure Tiny Tim. Scrooge so changed that he becomes like a second father to Tim. A Christmas Carol is one of the most popular Christmas stories in the world. It has been made in 2 plays and movies. At Christmas every year, A Christmas Carol can be seen on TV on the stage. The book's message of love and art shows that over many years, Charles Dickens still changes the lives of millions of people. Chapter 3: The London of Dickens. Charles Dickens often wrote about how London felt and looked. It was full of noise, smells, and movement. Many people thought it was the most exciting city in the world. When Charles took his books, he had to stay alert. Thousands of horse carts and carriages blocked the street. Sidewalks were jammed. Shoppers hurried in and out of stores while businessmen in top hats walked by beggars and rats. Street sellers sent outside and sold everything from strawberries to hot-baked potatoes. Shops and restaurants stayed busy. At night, the theater were full of people who came to see the latest play. The parks in London were popular places to relax and stroll. You walked down past out the road on horses, bows, and carriages. Nursemaids pushed baby strolls and children played in the grass. A lot of noise. Wonder said that London was always rattling, growling, and roaring. Excitement was everywhere. Thousands of street vendors shouted out their wares. Carriage drivers called out across the streets to one another. Paper boys yelled out news as they sold their papers. The sound of music often filled the air. Street musicians, organ played day and night, especially in poor neighborhoods. Brass band played in the parks. Carriages and cars had iron tires and made a big racket as they clattered on the uneven pavement. If someone was sick and needed quiet, somebody's help heaped straw in front of the house to muffle the sound. It was not good enough to drive you crazy. The big stink. The noise was bad, the smells were worse. I often threw the garbage in the street. Open sewers flowed beside the sidewalks. In the first part of the 19th century, farmers drove cattle to market down the middle streets, and horse and cow manure was everywhere. The sheep pens in the city was added to smell. Often people could not wash because they had no running water or bathrooms. Families often shared a single toilet with all families in the building. It's one report that 120 people shared the same toilet. The first half of the Victorian era, clean water was hard to get. When water came from drains and outdoor pumps, it was full of germs and made people sick. Ep- Epidemics of cholera and typhoid took many lives. In 1854, cholera epidemic killed over 30,000 people. In 1859, the city took action. Engineers began to work on water sewage pipes that ran miles underground. The new sewage system helped to make both the water and streets cleaner. The River Thames, which ran through London, was badly polluted. Until the sewage system was built, the river was full of garbage and runoffs from sewers and factories. At times, dead animals and dead people floated on the surface. Thames smelled really, really bad. The summer 1858 was very hot and the smell from Thames was at its worst. People called it the summer of the big stink. Lawmakers fled the parliament because the smell from the nearby river was so full. They tried hanging curtains drenched in the blending powder in the snore waste, but that did not stop the smell. Nasty soot and fog. Charles Dickens wrote that people always went around one blinking, wheezing, and choking. Who burned the coal to run factories and heat their houses. Clouds of coal smoke below from chimneys covered thing and later the black store. The bad air caused a blanket of brown or yellow smog to cover the city. Some people didn't see the sun for weeks. In the day, they carried lanterns to help them find their way down the streets. Some had red eyes and burning throats. Many died from lung disease caused by breathing polluted air. Then there were other dangers of fog. In December 1873, the smog was very thick. Some people even drowned when they lost their way and fell into the Thames. Rookeries. Many nice neighborhoods in London, but there were some very bad ones as well. Many were slums known as rookeries. But these slums known as rookeries. Rookeries were places where birds have their chicks. Slums got this nickname because they were crowded and noisy, just like rookeries. In the rookeries, people lived packed together in grim, dark buildings. Books and rats infested the rooms. Charles Dickens wrote that many houses had broken windows covered with rags and paper. He said that dirt was everywhere and people always just sat on steps, smoking, fighting, or yelling at each other. Crime. One of the Charles Dickens' most famous books is the Oliver Twist. So Oliver is a or poor orphan boy who lived in a workhouse in London. He falls into the hand of pickpocket thieves and murderers. They try to force Oliver into the life of crime. But what is was good, taken care by the kind people. Even though Oliver is the character in the book, there are thousands of kids just like him. Because they needed money, many stole for a living. In those days, kid orchards were arrested and punished just like grown-ups. Until late in the century, children as young as 12 were sent to adult prisons when they committed crimes. People have to be careful for pickpockets who lurk in railroad stations around the open markets. Because street lights were weak, many streets were unsafe at night. In the 1800s, the police department added extra policemen. They started using fingerprint and photography to help solve crimes. London slowly became a safer city, and the crime rate dropped. Costermongers. Costermongers are people who sell things from car stalls and wheelbarrows. A name from the coaster, an old word for apple, and monger, which means seller. Costermongers shout at different things with louder words. Can you guess what the customer is yelling? Lenny, what vinegar? Lenny, what vinegar? Pretty pines, pretty woman. Hot wonders, hot wonders. Get your salad here, get it here. Lumber bloaters, get your mouth bloaters. Hot cheese nuts, a penny a score. Pippins, pippins, whelks, beautiful whelks. What is this? Answers, vinegar, that was too easy. Pin woman. Spears, now that was hard. Still, it was popular drink for a plant. Bolster or solid hearing. Honey hot chestnuts for a penny. Pippins are apples. Whelks are the sea snails. That was crazy. Um. So today I'm done reading. Bye.